Hey everyone, this is Andrew Nagel of Alkanine Designs, and we're back with the next part of the start to finish tutorial, this multi-stone ring that we're going to be building. Today I'm going to show you how I built this textured band. And now I've shown you all how I do this before, but this is a bit more of an in-depth look at the process. We're going to be using two different gauges of half-round, half-hard wire, 22 and 20 gauge. We're also going to be using 4 lengths of 20 gauge square wire. I'm utilizing about 10 inches and 4 different lengths of that. And so yeah, that's going to be the base of the ring. And so what else I'm going to be needing is to cut off 4 lengths of the 20 gauge half hard, half round wire, because that's going to be utilized to make the texture and to hold the whole band together. So to get this started, you're going to line up all of your lengths of your base wires, and then you're going to take a super long section of the 22 gauge half round, half hard wire. I cut off about 2 feet worth of length, and I'm just starting in the middle of my 4 base wires, and I'm connecting them together by wrapping the center part of the half round wire together. And I say center part because you want equal lengths of that wire going off of each side, so you can continue wrapping it down the length of the entire ring band. We're going to basically be alternating these two different gauges of half round wire to create that textured look. So once you've flattened down that connection that you've made there on the base of your ring band, you're going to then bring in your lengths of your 20 gauge half round wire. It doesn't really have to be 20 gauge, you can use 22 gauge for this part as well. I just decided to use the 20 gauge because I felt it would give me kind of a thicker appearance to the details inside of the texture. Once I've got them all lined up, I'm going to take some of my pliers and then just kind of even down this side here, so that way when I wrap around the 22 gauge half round, it kind of sits, flat and flush with the rest of the wire. I'm also going to flatten that with my nylon nose pliers. Those are super wonderful. We're going to go ahead and do that same connection on the other side. Once you've made the connection on the other side, you can go ahead and flatten them down with the nylon pliers. The nylon pliers have the nylon coating, and thus they don't leave any tool marks on the wire when you work with them, so that's a great way to help just keep your wires clean as you're working with them. Now I'm going to open up the 20 gauge half round wire to start doing the detail for the ring band. So basically I'm just going to do kind of an alternating pattern where I'm pulling, starting from the bottom to the top, I'm pulling the first and third wire up, and then I'm wrapping the 22 gauge around the remaining lying down wires. Once I do it 3 times around, I'm going to then alternate them, so I'm going to bring wires 2 and 4 up and lay 1 and 3 down, and then continue wrapping the 22 gauge around the laying down wires, and then so on and so forth. So again, I'm alternating between having 1 and 3 up, and then having 2 and 4 down and wrapping them around, and then bringing up 2 and 4 and lying down 1 and 3 and wrapping it around that. You don't have to do it this way, you can do it in basically any sequence that you want to achieve any sort of pattern that you want. I've also seen people spell out words using this technique, so play around with the patterns and what you're doing and see what different results you might get. So again, I'm lifting up numbers 2 and 4 and lying down the 20 gauge wires 1 and 3, going from the bottom to the top here. Basically bottom of the screen to the top of the screen. And then just alternating between the 2 and 4 wires and the 1 and 3 wires, and covering each of those. And you'll see me take the pliers and kind of flatten down the lying down wires with the rest of with the rest of the 22 gauge, just so that way it all sits flush and nice and even as I'm progressing along this ring band. We're going to go around 9 sections up this ring band. It doesn't really matter. I'm just aiming for like a size 7. And, you know, you just kind of have to eyeball it. I don't really have like a cheat sheet of how far you should go down the ring band to make a certain size. I just go down the ring band as far as I need to make a specific size. When I hold this up to my ring dowel in a few moments, I will talk to you about how I gauge the size of the ring band and how that's going to ultimately end up being a specific size of ring. We're coming to the end of this sequence. I'm bringing back down the 2 and 4 wires. We're going to make those flush. We're going to wrap that 22 gauge around the lying down wires, and then I'm going to bring those back up and then lay down the 1 and 3 wires. So it's a pretty simple sequence. On the other textured ring band tutorial that I've shown you all on this channel, I believe I went a bit more complicated. So now that we're at the end of this sequence, I'm just going to flatten everything out with those nylon pliers, make sure it's all nice and smooth, and then we're going to go ahead and do this sequence on the other side. Again, this is just a simple alternating sequence. You can do even like, you could do, you know, having wires 2 and 3 lifted up while having 1 and 4 laying down, and then alternating between having 1 and 4 laying down and 2 and 3 up, and that creates a nice kind of, you know, geometric sort of look. This is sort of just a nice like alternating kind of textured or zipper look or whatever you want to call it. And so like I said, get creative and, you know, get funky with the different ways that you weave this together and see what sorts of results that you can achieve. This is where your creativity is really going to take hold, and you'll discover what sorts of styles work for yourself. I can describe, you know, what I do all day long, but what's going to make your work stand out from mine and from other people's is utilizing your own imagination and coming up with what works best for you and designing the things that you enjoy. I've always appreciated the texture bands on these rings. It just kind of adds a nice little element to the wire-wrapped ring and makes them look a bit more fancy, you know. And so once we get to the end of that sequence, going 9 times around on the other side, I flatten it out again with the nylon pliers, and we're ready to take this to the ring dowel and see what size we're going to get. I didn't really plan what size I was going for with this one, but basically when I take the band onto the ring dowel, this is a nice one. Rio Grande has a few different styles on their site, so check those out. This has the US sizes on one side and the UK sizes on the other. And basically what I do is I will take the center part of that ring band and bring it on to the ring dowel, and then just push that ring around the ring dowel, or push the band around the ring dowel to form the circular ring. And now with wire, since you're bringing around those connections and connecting it to the band, what I like to do is whatever size that this comes flush to on the dowel, it's basically going to be one size smaller or maybe a half size smaller when you put your connections around the band. So this is sitting at a size 7 on the ring dowel about. When I put it on here, it's about a size 7. So once I put my connections on, it will end up being about a size 6 to 6.5, probably like a 6 1/4. So basically once you make your connections, that drops down your size just a little bit, so be aware of that. If you're aiming for like a size 9, you're going to want to start off with either a size 9.5 or size 10, you know, opening on your ring band here, because your connections are going to take it down just a little bit. So once I put it back on, that's right at about a size 8, excuse me. So that'll be about a size 7 ring when all is said and done. And if you use thinner gauges for your base wires, like 21 gauge square for your base wires, it'll, you know, have less of an effect. The 20 gauge is a bit thicker, and so if you're doing like 18 gauge for your base wires, then that's going to reduce the size even more when you put your connections on the band. So what I'm doing here to finish this up is just as I have my sides laying flat next to each other to create a platform for the opal, I'm connecting them together with the remaining lengths of the 22 gauge half round wire. Once those are nice and flush next to each other, I'm going to bring those gauges down underneath the platform and then over and connect them to the side lengths of 21 gauge square that you see hanging off of the side of the ring there. I want this platform to be a pretty evenly spaced and all of those lines of the 22 gauge to be flush next to each other. The thing with Ethiopian opals, they usually have a little bit of clarity through them so you can see what's on the bottom. The other thing that's nice to do in a situation like this is to leave an opening underneath the stone so that way the light can go all the way through and there's no metal reflecting through the back of the stone. But since I'm doing a flat platform, I'm going to make sure that this is nice and flush and everything looks all even and smooth together, so that way when we set the Ethiopian opal on top of there, even though some of the silver will kind of reflect through, it's not going to look bad, it'll just look like a nice little textured backing behind the opal. We're going to just flatten that all out and make sure it's nice and flush. Clip off the extras of our connecting wires here on the base wire. I've just opened up the innermost wire and, wrapped that 22 gauge around that wire a couple of times. So yeah, now we're basically ready to rock and roll. You can see that the opal sits on here very nicely, and that's what I mean by the metal reflecting through. But once we get our detailing on there, that's not really going to be noticeable, and once we oxidize it as well, that'll darken the back a bit too. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you have a chance, check out my Patreon channel. They are 6 months ahead of this channel. And so, yeah, that means you get to see a lot more tutorials. I have like over 80 tutorials on there at this point. So thank you all so much and have a great weekend.